Good morning. Thank you for joining us today for the daily devotional. Today we'll continue to study Psalm 88. Yesterday we looked at verses 1 and 2. We saw that the psalmist has been crying out to God day in and day out. He has been unrelentingly crying out to God. For how long? Look at verse 15 in Psalm 88. It reads, "Afflicted and close to death from my youth up." So he's been crying since the days of his youth. Now keep in mind that the psalmist may be losing hope here because he did not have what we have today. We have today the revelation that has been given to us in the New Testament, the hope of the gospel. And we have the hope that is given to us by Jesus in the parable of the persistent widow we read in Luke chapter 18. Verses 7 and 8, "Will not God give justice to his elect who cry to him day and night?" That's the assurance that we have. It reads, "Will he delay long over them? I tell you, he will give justice to them speedily." Beloved, God will definitely answer our prayers. But what happens when we pray and we do not see the answers? And we need to understand that God operates on his timetable, not on our timetable. God's timing is different from ours. But in the end, he makes all things beautiful. Today, let us read Psalm 88, verses 3 through 9. "For my soul is full of troubles, and my life draws near to Sheol. I am counted among those who go down to the pit. I am a man who has no strength, like one set loose among the dead, like the slain that lie in the grave, like those whom you remember no more, for they are cut off from your hand. You have put me in the depths of the pit, in the regions dark and deep. Your wrath lies heavy upon me, and you overwhelm me with all your waves, Selah. You have caused my companions to shun me. You have made me a horror to them. I am shut and so that I cannot escape. My eye grows dim through sorrow. Every day I call upon you, O Lord. I spread my hands to you." As we read verses 3 through 9, we see that even though Heman, the author of the psalm, feels that his prayer is not heard, he is absolutely certain that God is sovereign over his circumstances. Look at what he writes in verse 3. His life is drawn near to the grave. It's a life-threatening situation. We don't know what it is. It could have been a life-threatening disease. And then he says, "I have no strength in me to go any further." This could be a man in the ICU suffering and has almost become a statistic to the hospital death registry. He's speaking as if his one foot is in the grave. The psalmist has resigned himself to this hopeless fact. He felt utterly forsaken and forgotten. Life-threatening circumstances had overwhelmed him to such an extent that he felt as if large waves was drowning him. The psalmist continues in verse 8. "You have caused my companions to shun me. You have made me a horror to them. I am shut in so that I cannot escape." Meaning he is suffering alone in this. His companions have left him. Verse 9 reads, "My eyes grow dim through sorrow. Every day I call upon you, O Lord. I spread out my hands to you." You see, the psalmist has cried so much that his eyes were swollen with grief. He called out to the Lord, but there was no answer. The psalmist is acknowledging that God is sovereign, that he is loving, and that he is in control. Heman believed that God was in charge of everything, including his troubles. And this is how Heman the Ezrahite coped with his suffering, by acknowledging God as a sovereign one who rules the heavens and the earth. May we look to God And may we recognize that God is still on the throne as we go through suffering. And this should be a reminder to us as we read this psalm that even in the midst of the suffering, Heman was able to look to God, was able to confess with his mouth that God, you are in the midst of this. And God, you are on the throne. That God, you are sovereign. And may this be a reminder to us as we go through this day. Have a wonderful day. Blessings.